Then we open a pawn shop. That's what I've always done, because I enjoy it. I mean, there are a lot of things going on there. Say something good for God and country, then get back to work. That's a good one. I'm going to hit you, CH. He is the biggest liar of this century. When a witness called Rick Harrison out on this shocking claim during a recent hearing, it sent shockwaves through the room. Fans of the hit reality show Pawn Stars all over the world were shocked when they found out that Rick Harrison, the man who was very good at business and knew a lot about old things, had been given a life sentence in jail. Where did the man go who always seemed to have the upper hand go? Is there a dark secret hiding behind that calm and smart exterior? Now that Rick is at the top of his TV job, his life has taken a dark, sudden, and unknown turn. Very quickly, rumors have spread that he is involved in scams in the trade of stolen antiques. Watch this movie to see how a Pawn Stars star went from being famous to being in trouble with the law. While he was on the hit reality TV show Pawn Stars, Richard Kevin Harrison was better known as Rick Harrison. He became famous for both his acting and the interesting stories about his life that caught the attention of the media. Since July 2009, Pawn Stars has been filmed at the Harrison family's gold and silver pawn shop at 713 South Las Vegas Boulevard. Who would have thought that a normal pawn shop could become one of the most watched shows on the History Channel, showing the interesting and sometimes strange world of pawnbroking? Richard Kevin Harrison was born on March 22, 1965 in Lexington, North Carolina. He is a famous businessman and a well-known TV personality in the United States. This boy's family moved to San Diego, California, when he was only 2 years old. He spent most of his childhood there. Few people know that Rick had seizures from the time he was 8 years old, because of which he spent a lot of time reading. In turn, this helped him learn a huge amount about history, which was very important to his later work. But could his past problems have anything to do with the legal problems he is having now? Rick didn't have a very peaceful youth. Because of his seizures, he missed a lot of school, and by his junior year of high school, he had dropped out. But the break in his official schooling did not stop him from wanting to learn and desire to do well. Instead, Rick learned on his own by reading a lot of books, mostly about business and history. This way of self-teaching helped him learn a lot, which fans could see in his impressive performances on Pawn Stars. What could have made Rick, who was so independent and interested in the world, get into trouble with the law? Rick began working with his father on different business projects when he was a teenager. This is where he got a keen eye, the ability to tell how much something is worth and whether it is real, which will be very useful for his future job. Rick's girlfriend got pregnant when she was 17 years old and they later got married. After 8 years of marriage, the young pair split up. They had 2 boys, Corey and Adam. Rich Harrison, Rick's dad, opened a coin and gold shop in Las Vegas, Nevada when the family moved there in 1981. Did the ups and downs in Rick's personal life affect what he did and decided in the future? It began as a small coin shop but quickly grew into the before 1989 the gold and silver pawn shop was known all over the world. It later became the main setting for Pawn Stars. The Harrison family made the smart move to switch from a coin shop to a pawn shop because they thought they could make more money in the pawn shop. In the beginning, Rick and his father had a hard time because they were working hard to build a name in Las Vegas. Rick had to deal with tough people and sometimes dangerous situations. But could the hard times they had building their careers have caused some of what bad decisions were made later? By the early 2000s, Rick was a well-known person in Las Vegas because he knew a lot about different kinds of antiques and collectibles. People from all over the world came to his pawn shop because it was known as a great place to find unique and expensive things. Rick saw that his business could be used to make people laugh, but what happened next? Rick Harrison was a very famous and well-known person. What could have led to him getting a life sentence? Stay tuned for more updates to help solve this riddle. But did Rick stop after running a pawn shop? Well, not at all. This driven man had a big idea: he should make the everyday things that happen in his shop into an exciting reality TV show. What made Rick keep working on this idea over and over again? Did he see that the unique deals and history stories behind each item could be fun and teach him something? Rick kept knocking on TV station doors for years and was turned down many times, but his determination finally paid off. He made a deal with History Channel in 2009, which started a new part of his work. Could Rick have known that making this choice would forever change his life and the lives of his family? On Pawn Stars, which soon came out, fans went behind the scenes with Rick, his son Corey Big Hoss Harrison, Richard the Old Man Harrison, their close friend Austin Chumley Russell, and other people who worked at the gold and silver pawn shop. What it takes to buy, sell, and appraise expensive and sometimes strange objects was shown on the show. The show became a huge hit right away, turning Rick from a neighborhood pawn shop owner into a TV star that millions of people knew. The simple catchphrases he used, people liked how confidently he spoke and how much he knew about history. When Rick was negotiating with people who wanted to sell their treasures, his famous phrase, "the best I can do is," became a trademark. One thing that made Pawn Stars unique from other reality TV shows was that Rick always made sure that the show was educational. Each episode had interesting historical information about the things that were brought into the shop. Rick often gave background stories and lots of details to show how knowledgeable he is. Rick grew the pawn shop, which brought in people from all over the world who wanted to see the show's stars or even be in an episode. Rick used his newfound fame to write books, go to live shows, and even open a successful restaurant called Rick's Rollin' Smoke Barbecue and Tavern. Sales went through the roof. Rick reached new heights after Pawn Stars made him famous. He went on many talk shows, was in many magazines, and became a popular speaker at business events. Many Americans related to his stories of beating hardship, and his honest business advice won him respect in both the entertainment and business world. But what really made Rick Harrison famous in the antiques and collectibles business? Throughout his work, Rick had an amazing knack for finding secret value in places that other people might have missed. Could this be a natural skill or the result of learning new things all the time? What made him good at Pawn Stars? Was it his sharp eye and wide knowledge? Pawn Stars viewers have seen Rick value a wide range of things, from priceless historical papers to classic cars, and from old artifacts to modern collectibles. It seemed like he knew everything, but he often asked experts for help when he needed it, faced with things he didn't know about. It's possible that this shows how smart and aware of his limits the investor is. A lot of things have been bought and sold by Rick on the show, and some deals have gone well and others haven't. Could his deep knowledge of watches, guns, and items from U.S. history be what made him so rich? Rick bought the New England Patriots Super Bowl ring in 2001 for $2,600, but later had it evaluated and found to be worth a lot more. This was one of his most famous deals. Could this deal be a stroke of luck or the result of his smart sense of what collectible sports items is worth and how to get it? He also bought a collection of Spanish gold doubloons that were found in the wreckage of a ship in 1715. This shows that he was interested in both history and valuable metals. Maybe these are the only things we know about Rick's life. Rick Harrison has had a lot of wins and happy times, but he has also lost a lot. What terrible events has he been through? How did they change him? There are sad stories and broken hearts behind the bright lights. Behind the bright lights and happy-looking, despite what you might hear on TV, Rick Harrison's personal life has been full of ups and downs and big losses. His life has been full of sad events, broken relationships, and wounds that won't heal. It's not all about rare antiques and multi-million-dollar deals. Rick has been through 3 bad marriages. It's possible that each one has left scars on his soul. It's easy to picture how hurt and alone Rick must have felt when relationships he was in ended. Things you thought were rock solid broke down. Could each breakup have taken away some of his faith, hope, and happiness with his family? Rick got married to Kim Harrison for the first time in 1982, but they split up just 3 years later. This was a personal tragedy that showed Rick how family life can fall apart for the first time. Rick's marriage gave him two boys, Corey and Adam, but it ended quickly, forcing him to balance being a dad with his own goal. This tragedy made Rick more careful about relationships in the future and further made him even more determined to get a steady job so he could support his kids. This was a tough time for Rick, but his father Richard was there for him and gave him realistic advice and financial support. But that wasn't the end of the pain. Rick then married Tracy Harrison in 1986. Their 25-year marriage seemed to have built a strong base, especially after their son Jake was born. But in the end, this marriage too ended in divorce in 2011. This was a big surprise because the amount of time they had spent together seemed to have built a strong base. Rick had to deal with feelings of failure and self-doubt about his ability to keep his family happy after his marriage ended. His personal life became less public after the split. He focused more on his job at the pawn shop and the Pawn Stars show. Richard, Rick's father, remained an important part of both his business and his life. He helped Rick get through his sadness and strengthened his sense of Rick's third marriage to Deanna Bird. It began in 2013 and was seen at first as a chance for him to find happiness again after his previous two failed relationships. But by 2021, this marriage too had ended in divorce. This was the third time Rick had to face the painful truth of a failed relationship. Many failed relationships in his personal life made him doubt love and grow more reclusive, and he didn't want anyone to know about his personal life. But Rick's bad luck doesn't end there. The death of his father, Richard Benjamin Harrison Jr., on June 25, 2018, was one of the worst things that happened to him. Rick's father was more than just a co-worker on Pawn Stars. He was also a wise advisor in both business and life. The old man was an important part of the gold and silver pawn shop. It was there that Rick learned to be patient, run a business, and value family. Rick's father's death left a big hole in his heart, leaving him alone and with the bigger burden of he was carrying on the work that he and his father had started. After that, Rick was less talkative but more eager to protect the shop's name and take the show more seriously. Rick has been open about his sadness, especially since the death of his father in 2018. He fell into a mental slump after losing his beloved father, which made the stress of work and life even worse. This tragedy made Rick think more deeply about himself and made him stronger, eager to get through hard times. Rick's biggest influence was his father Richard, whose strong and responsible beliefs helped him grow. Rick should stay strong and keep running Pawn Stars and the pawn shop. At that point, it looked like the pain would end, but right after Rick's worst nightmare came true, his son Adam lost a child, especially one because of a drug accident, is a terrible pain that can't be fixed. Rick sobs as he thinks about his regrets, and the endless what-ifs that keep going through his mind show how much pain he is in. Can this deep hurt get better with time? In an emotional conversation, the people who made Pawn Stars talked about the terrible loss of his 39-year-old son. Rick Harrison said, "I think about him every day." He thought about how hard life was for his son Adam as tears filled his eyes. Adam had been addicted to drugs since he was in his 20s, and Rick didn't try to hide that fact. He had taken his son to rehab more than once in the hopes that he would change. But Adam stayed stuck in the circle of addiction, which broke Rick's heart. Was there something Rick missed, like another choice he should have made to stop this terrible event? Rick can't help but wonder if there was something else he could have done. "I think I did everything right," but you just sit there thinking, what if I had done this? What if I had done that? You have hundreds of thoughts going through your head. Rick's painful self-questioning words show how much he was struggling. It was terrible when Adam overdosed on fentanyl, a manufactured painkiller that is very dangerous, and killed him. Can anyone imagine how terrible it is for a dad to lose his child, his much-loved child? Adam Harrison was living in a hotel in Las Vegas when he was found not breathing. He was later pronounced dead, and probe by the cops proved that the person died from taking too much fentanyl and methamphetamine. The office of the medical inspector stated that it was a terrible. Rick had previously talked about the fentanyl problem in the United States and asked people to pay more attention to its dangerous
Could Adam's death be a painful way for people to wake up to this problem? In a painful talk with Graham Bensinger, Rick Harrison said, "As a parent of a child struggling with drug addiction, you try to treat them badly, but you never see an overdose coming." This powerful statement shows how powerless and in pain parents are when their child is hooked to drugs. Rick never thought that the worst tragedy would happen to his family, no matter how hard he tried. Is this a pain that words can't fully describe? The storm did not end there, though. It kept going strong as Rick Harrison found he was involved in a big lawsuit and the judge sentenced him to life in jail. So why did people think Rick Harrison was the biggest con artist of the century? Fraud, not paying taxes, and selling fake antiques are some of the dark secrets that people keep. Unfortunately, Rick had some pretty bad situations along with his good ones, and most of them were his own fault. In 2022, Rick Harrison had to deal with a number of lawsuits that involved the gold. In 2012, there was an important case when a Rick and the shop were sued by a customer named Wayne F. Jeffrey for selling a stolen piece of gold. After Jeff said he bought a diamond ring from the store, he learned that it had been stolen and was taken by the police. He wanted to be paid back for the money he paid and for other losses worth about $40,000. Rick replied that his store closely followed pawn shop rules, which meant that they checked with the officials before selling any items. He said the store couldn't have known, unless it was marked in the police computer, the thing was stolen. After a long court case, the judge found in Rick's favor, saying that gold and silver pawn shop had not met the break. Jeff did not get paid and Rick did not lose a lot of money because of the case getting over. But things got worse in 2023 when Rick's legal problems took a sudden turn. Federal agents were sent to arrest him without warning, broke into his Las Vegas home. What led to this really scary raid? At first, most people didn't know what the study was about, which led to a lot of stories online. Was there a dark truth that was slowly coming out? Fans and even people close to Rick were shocked by the raid. A raid was done on Rick's house and the famous gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas by FBI agents, inspectors, and IRS agents from the Cultural Heritage Protection Department. When FBI agents and when police arrived at the pawn shop, the event made headlines right away. Customers and staff who were there at the time were briefly held and asked to give information. The people who worked at gold and silver pawn shop said they didn't know of any deal Rick may have made, so this was a big surprise to everyone. At the same time, FBI agents took a lot of important things like computers, financial records, and a bunch of things from the inventory that they thought might have something to do with stolen artifacts from museums and private collections. Several things were taken away. Experts said belonged to well-known museums and private collections. One of these was a group of Mayan items that were reportedly stolen from a famous museum in Mexico. There were papers that showed that these items had been traded with a number of shady middlemen. The picture in Rick's house was from the 18th century and used to belong to a museum in Paris. It was stolen in a big theft in 2003. The officers also found a lot of papers, contracts, and deals that showed the trade of stolen historical, such as several statues that had been taken from private collections. Secret sources within the IRS said that they thought Harrison had avoided paying taxes by not declaring all of his income and hiding the money he made from selling antiques and doing other business through middlemen. Millions of dollars worth of tax fraud were said to have been committed because of this. The investigation started when the IRS found some strange things in gold and silver pawn shops' financial records. Tax experts said that Rick's shop had a number of big deals that were not fully disclosed in financial records, and it looked like these profits had been hidden by going through shell companies or private accounts. Additionally, it was said that Rick Harrison had done illegal business with foreign partners and not properly reported the money he made from these deals. The IRS investigators also found that some of these deals were hidden as fake fees or savings to lower his tax obligations. it looked into. Eventually, Rick Harrison was charged with a number of major crimes such as fraud, tax evasion, and buying stolen historical things through middlemen. It was said that he had taken part in the criminal of items that were stolen from museums and private collections. Fans and investors started to question whether or not the deals at his pawn shop were legal and moral, which hurt his public image a lot. David Green was another important witness in Rick Harrison's case. Green is a well-known antique collector who has a strong voice in the community of antique lovers and collectors. David Green had an interesting interaction with Rick Harrison, which he said was one of the things that made him question whether the deals going on at in Silver Pawn Shop were legal. David said in his statement that he went to Rick Harrison's shop in late 2020 to try to sell a very rare antique, a copper mirror from the Qing dynasty that is more than 300 years old. This very rare and valuable item had been passed down through his family for many generations. When David got to Rick's shop, he was sure he was dealing with someone who really liked it, someone he knew and respected the historical value of things like the brass mirror he owned. At the time I thought I was just dealing with someone who liked it and knew a lot about history items and could help me sell this item. Rick was always excited about and knowledgeable about old things, so I felt very comfortable selling the mirror to his shop, David said in his statement. However, after the mirror was moved and Rick paid him a fair amount of money, in the weeks that followed, David started to notice some odd things. He talked to other people who liked collecting old things and found out that his bronze mirror had been sold at a big sale at a well-known museum in New York. It was strange that the mirror had been sold a very high price, but no one knew where it came from. David then did more research and talked to people who work in the antique gathering business. Some of his friends in the field. It was proven that the mirror may have been sold to shady means or even taken from private homes before it got to Rick Harrison. After that happened, I started to think that many of the things in Rick's shop might not have come from real places, David said in his statement. David Green said that this event made him think about the deals he had made at Golden Sun when he was selling his antique. He didn't think it might have a shady history, but when he found out that it had, since it had been resold without any clear information about where it came from, he felt lied to and had reason to think that other things in the shop might also have unclear backgrounds. Was Rick really involved in these shady things? A look into what happened seemed to have begun with financial institutions reporting strange transactions and complaints from former business partners. Not long after the raid, the History Channel stopped making Pawn Stars. Could this be the end of Rick's time? David, his lawyer, a well-known lawyer in Las Vegas named Marshall, told the public that Rick had always run his business carefully and in line with the law. Soon after the raid, Rick was arrested. The next day he was freed, but he had to go to court a few days later. Is there a totally different person behind the businessman who seems honest? And it was made clear again by Rick's lawyer, David Marshall, that Rick strongly rejected all charges and would fight hard in court. But would this denial be enough to hold up against the proof that the police have gathered? The law says the fight went on for almost a year and Rick kept saying that he was innocent. But as time went on, more and more proof was gathered against him, and former co-workers spoke out against him, making his case even weaker than before. For their case, the prosecution showed encrypted financial records, strange messages, and statements from former workers who said Rick told them to change papers for valuable items. They also showed proof that he had set up accounts in other countries to hide the money he made from certain high-value deals. One piece of proof that was seen as especially bad was a Rick and an unknown supplier talked about how to clean up the history of an 18th century paper that was supposedly stolen from a university in a series of text messages. Could this finally be the proof that Rick is involved in the illegal trade of antiques? Rick is said to have talked about how to arrange a transaction so that it wouldn't trigger the need to report big cash transactions in another conversation. Could these messages show a clever way to avoid being caught by the last life sentence? It was so quiet in the courtroom that it felt like no sound could be heard when the judge was getting ready to give the sentence. It was impossible not to look at Rick Harrison, who had tried to stay calm during the hearing. But no one could miss the stress in his eyes. His son Corey, who was sitting behind him, looked pale and his face showed that he was shocked and worried. Chumley, who had been Rick's partner, friend, and student for a long time, couldn't hide how he felt. He put his head in his hands and looked down. His eyes were sadness. There was a lot of stress in the courtroom because this wasn't just any hearing. It was a meeting with fate. The room was very quiet as the judge read the punishment. The judge said, "Defendant, you are sentenced to life in prison for your part in the trade of antiques and serious financial fraud." This made the room even more silent. Not only Rick but also a lot of lawyers were shocked by this decision. It looked like too harsh of a term for financial crimes, but the judge stressed that it was not only for financial crimes but also for taking away something that can't be replaced. Harm done to the and historical assets of people. Mr. Harrison presented himself to the public as a history buff who cared about the stories behind old objects, but in reality he took part in a planned scheme to steal and destroy irreplaceable cultural heritage for his own benefit, the judge said in a harsh voice. The court can't ignore how bad these actions are. As soon as Rick's lawyers heard the sentence, they filed an appeal, saying that the punishment was too harsh and broke the defendant's rights, especially since they were not charged with any dangerous crimes. They asked that Rick be released on bail while they waited for the outcome of the appeal. But to everyone's surprise, the court turned down his bail request. The picture of Rick being handcuffed and taken away quickly became the center of attention in the media. It also went viral on social media very quickly, causing a strong wave of debate. Could this mean the end of all? Would there really be justice, or would Rick Harrison lose because of the law, which he thought he could control? The decision caused a lot of disagreement among the people and the media. Some of Rick's friends thought he didn't deserve such a harsh term, seeing it as a string of bad financial decisions made in a business setting full of traps. Someone who had worked in the pawn and antique business all his life and loved history, that's what they thought of him. Another group, though, said that Rick should have been given the sentence because his actions not only hurt his own image but also did a lot of damage to world culture. After the decision was given, the History Channel, where Pawn Stars had become a hit, moved quickly. The network officially broke up with Rick Harrison by ending the show and taking away all repeats from its schedule right away. The channel said in a statement that it was very upset about Rick's actions and restated its dedication to safeguarding historical items and cultural property. This was a tough choice that had to be made to protect the network's image. Pawn Stars was an important part of TV history, and its loss would leave a big hole that won't be easy to fill. The question still stands: what will air on the History Channel instead of this famous show? Even so, even though Rick Harrison has been in a lot of legal problems, his impact on reality. Before he had these legal problems, he had built a huge business company that included a lot more than just the gold and silver pawn shop. In Las Vegas, he had opened restaurants and bars, and he had plans to grow even more in other places. But will these businesses continue to do well without Rick's direction? His son Corey runs the gold and silver pawn shop right now. However, this duty is not at all. In a teary conversation a few months after his father's death, Corey talked about how hard it is to run and grow the family business while he was being sentenced. "We've put in place strict checks to make sure that every item we buy comes from a legal source. What happened was wrong, and we are committed to being part of the solution, not part of the problem," Corey said. He hoped that these steps would help customers and the community trust them again. Chumley had always seen Rick as both a teacher and a father figure, and he said, "I learned a lot from Rick, but I I'll also have to accept that there are some things about him I never saw or heard about. Maybe I didn't want to see. Is there something about Rick's truth that anyone close to him still doesn't fully understand? Even though the Harrison family was in a lot of trouble, they still felt love and support from fans all over the world. Corey said, "The messages of support from all of you have really saved our dad's life. He reads every letter and feels strong knowing that so many people still believe in him." Could this love get Rick through his worst days? The family also held outside the shop. There were prayer meetings where loyal fans got together to show their support. Could these small actions make a big difference during this tough time? The case of Rick Harrison is still going on, and every new detail keeps people interested. The show Pawn Stars and the attention it gets from viewers make this story even more complicated and mysterious. What do you think will happen? Do you think Rick Harrison will be able to handle this court storm? In the meantime, he can be sure that his friends will be there for him, help him feel better and give him hope. If you really like Pawn Stars, you might want to send Rick good thoughts and words of support as a way to show your appreciation for what he has done for TV over the years. Don't forget to hit like, turn on notifications and subscribe to the station if you liked the video to get the latest news.